What's the dumbest thing you actually believed? As a kid, my sister told me that we had an older brother that died. She said he died when playing bowling and his fingers didn't come out the ball and slid all the way down the alley. Then he turned into a skittle. He turned into a skittle. Odd turn of events. Skittle is another word for bowling pin, if that makes more sense. That line in 7th Harry Potter book makes so much more sense now. It was something like the Death Eaters fell about like Skittles, and I was like J.K. Rowling must have been eating candy when she wrote that line. Edit. I just realized that might be the dumbest thing I've ever believed. Lol. You never know when advertising can creep in. Death Eaters fell like Skittles. Voldemort, you're not you when you're hungry. Have a Snickers. I used to think that people exclusively wore hats if they were bald, because that's why my dad wore a hat. My dad is bald but has always had a beard, since I've known him, anyway. He was also a serviceman. He used to tell me that the reason he was bald was that he stood on a landmine which blew the hair off the top of his head and it slipped round to give him the beard instead. As a child I was just like, yep, makes sense. Hair not on head, hair in chin. That's gravity for you. He also told me that a scar on his leg was from a gunshot wound. 20 years later I got a bug bite on my leg, that got infected, sorry, hope you're not eating, and left a perfectly round scar in the same place as his. I commented on how much my bug bite scar looked like his gunshot wound scar and he said, "What? Is that what I told you?" "No, this was a bug bite that got infected." Ah, dads. Ha, that reminds me of my dad, Navy, telling me a scar on his arm was from a sword fight with pirates. Totally fell for it. Edit, just also remembered it backfired on him. Of course I told all the neighborhood kids with great pride and excitement. He totally had the piss taken out of him by the neighborhood dads down the local pub when the kids all went home asking their dads if they'd fought pirates too. My dad told me this story about how he was training with a bolt-action rifle in the Air Force. Long story short, the gun exploded, his hand was crushed and ripped apart at the same time, some bones were turned to powder, and he had to have emergency surgery to save his hand. He told me they gave him the option of getting an attachment for a gun or sword, but he turned them down because he liked to work with his hands. All true, except the attachment. Like 6 years later I play Final Fantasy VII and learn about Barrett's arm. Irony isn't exactly the right word, but it's damn close. Edit, a word. That reindeer wasn't an actual animal but specifically a mythical animal that Santa Claus used. I believed this until I was 23 or so when I saw some nature documentary talking about reindeer. I was like, what? The reverse unicorn. Ah, Santa and Mrs. Claus' favorite position. I thought that was going up the chimney. More so naive and innocent rather than dumb, but still funny. My dad used to tell us kids that a dwarf little person worked in and operated every car park barrier in the world. Every time he drove up to one, he'd press the button for the ticket and say, "Cheers mate, how's the wife?" and fake a conversation as he waited for the barrier to open. Lol. That's fantastic, he sounds like a great dad. Did he do this at ATMs too? Of course, ATM stands for a tiny man. Sounds like the nickname all my ex-girlfriends had for me. I was convinced that Greeks still worshipped Zeus and other gods for a while after I heard the word Greek Orthodox Church as a kid. This reminds me of another stupid thing I believed. When I was in middle school I watched a documentary about Gothic churches. I believed that goth was a religion. I asked a couple goth friends at the time about their religion. They played along for a while that day, until finally I realized they were laughing at me. I later realized Gothic is describing the architecture of the church. My friends never let me live that one down. When I was a kid I used to think professional wrestling was real, and The Undertaker scared the living shit out of me during his whole Ministry of Darkness phase. I thought he actually was Satan's minister or something. Like yeah, he's an undead overlord of hell, here to bring an eternity of darkness and misery to this planet, but he also has to make a weekly television appearance to win a wrestling competition, and you can buy his action figure at Toys R Us. That the Great Wall of China had a cat adoption program. I was meeting my friend's boyfriend for the first time, and he mentioned that he had just adopted one of the retired Great Wall of China cats. China trains these cats to patrol the wall and kill vermin, and at the end of their 7-year stint they are retired and adopted out to a forever home. I kept asking questions about it. How do you apply? Are they a specific breed? How do they get transported worldwide? In the end, He told me that he made the whole thing up because my friend had told him I was really gullible and wanted to see how far he could push it, but he didn't think I'd get so enthused. The worst part? I was in my mid-20s at the time. Edit, thanks for the awards, lovelies. Also, just thought I'd address some of the comments and clarify that my friend is actually a really sweet person. She's stood up for me many times when people have been cruel or insulting. It was an innocent prank, and I'm okay with taking the piss out of myself. Smile. It's not actually that far-fetched. The British government has an official title of Chief Mouser to the Cabinet Office, which is held by a cat. As the title suggests, the cat is employed to keep 10 Downing Street free of mice. There's been cats around Parliament for half a millennium, but the title is a modern invention. I'm not making this up, the current one is called Larry. Can confirm, we love Larry more than we've ever liked anyone in our entire parliamentary history. Larry gets a credit on media upload sites when he wanders round outside number 10. God save the Mouser. When I was a little kid, I believed that when people got divorced, they had a divorce ceremony, like where they had to go to church and say, I know, and I imagined the woman wore a black divorce dress, like her wedding dress had been dyed black, and that everybody went to the reception where the ex-bride and ex-groom sat on opposite sides of the hall, and there was a divorce cake where the little bride and groom on top had their backs to each other with their arms angrily crossed. I eventually learned, from watching my mom's soap operas, that this was not the case, and was kind of disappointed because I'd been to a few weddings by then, and was interested in what a divorce ceremony was like. Can these exist? Only in couples that split amicably. In instances of cheating, abuse, intense legal conflict, and hard feelings, which are incredibly common, even when relationships were good, I can't foresee this becoming a tradition. That douche Brad cheated on you. If I were you, I'd key his car I'm waiting for after the divorce ceremony. I want good photos for Instagram. Then I'll duck his shit up. My dog went to a farm. Until I was 35. I had 2 turtles for over 10 years until I went off to college. My mom told me she found a turtle lady that takes in unwanted turtles, and that they live in a nice big pond area in her backyard. Believed her because my mom isn't the type to lie. A few years later I started to question it though because of the pet sent to a farm stories as I'd heard other people tell. I confronted my mom about it and she maintained that she told the truth. I did some digging and found out that there actually was a turtle lady in our city. I went for a visit and sure enough, my turtles were there, along with a ton of others. So I guess sometimes these stories have a happy ending. My mom actually is a turtle lady, and the whole time I was growing up people would bring us turtles and tortoises and shit and my mom would take them in. Most of the time she would go on to find other homes for them, but there are still like half a dozen or so tortoises in the backyard, and she still takes turtles in, but for the most part it's all slowed down. I believed my uncle's roommate just slept on the couch. We lived with our uncles for a while when my mother worked on the pipeline. I thought they were so selfless by sharing a bed so us kids could have the other bedroom. I would be a teen before I learned that one of my uncles wasn't my uncle, he was just my uncle's lover. I grew up in a very liberal hippie town and my uncle also shared a bed with a guy, except they just told me it was his life partner boyfriend because they didn't see a reason to censor. When I was 8, some kid at school was talking about their uncle who has a roommate that shares his bed and I told him your uncle is gay, that's probably his boyfriend, and he refused to talk to me for the rest of the year. Then 5 years later he told me I had been right, he just realized his uncle was gay. He took his time. Still I think it's nice that he felt the need to tell you after 5 years. Yeah, I agree. Closure for the both of them. When I was little, I genuinely believed the Teletubbies were evil and that if I didn't watch them on TV every night, even though I hated the show, that they would come and get me. To be fair though, they're kind of creepy. But what will happen when you stop? Well, eventually I stopped watching it because I realized that wasn't true. Your funeral.